The very fact of this show is insane to me. It's a year-long effort that involves the marketing and events teams and all the engineers in the organization. I am but a modest MC, but as an observer of this process, I can tell you it is awe-inspiring in scope. And so I am so very happy to kick off this incredible experience with you all this morning. Before we get underway, there's some housekeeping. First of all, closed captioning is available throughout all of our main stage talks, and you can turn it on from settings in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Be sure to join our conversation in our Slack channel at springone.slack.com. And if you're on Twitter like me, our hashtag is #SpringOne. A big theme for this year's SpringOne is the concept of developer flow. We've got very little time, though, and so much to know about flow, so let's go. First up, let's welcome to the SpringOne main stage Senior Vice President and General Manager of Modern Apps and Management, Ajay Patel.
I want you to think about this for a minute. When was the last time you were in the zone? When was the last time you got to sit down and create something without interruption? As my son, who's a developer, best described it to me, it's when ideas naturally flow and turn into beautiful design and code. Your build and deploys are effortless. Where the tools and your dev environment is working for you, not against you. Now imagine that was every day. Wouldn't that be simply awesome? How much more creative could you be? What would you create? Well, why am I asking you all these questions? Sometimes we need to remember that application development is really a creative endeavor. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Good news is that SpringOne provides the opportunity to connect, learn, and get inspired to keep this innovation going, to help you create those wonderful digital experiences and applications that are transforming the world. That is, when you're not mired in toil, or waiting, or constantly getting interrupted. As a developer, you want to be able to get into the zone and flow state. It is so much more enjoyable, and it allows you to be doing much more creative, innovative work. So what's getting in the way? What's stopping you from getting into that flow state? What's changed? What's making it so hard? We have noticed there are at least 4 major factors that are inhibitor to your flow, and I'm sure you can relate. The first is complexity and surplus of choice. You know that feeling of analysis paralysis when faced with an abundance of options, whether it's what to watch on Netflix or which of the 17 ways to deploy a container on one of these clouds. But the problem isn't just the upfront analysis or trade-offs. It's the ongoing burden of supporting these choices at every layer. Modern applications are built as discrete functional parts using many cloud primitives. You as a developer are dealing with increased complexity from an increased number of primitives, more pieces that need to be wired, making it difficult to stand up, deploy, and debug. We know from our State of Observability survey that cloud application requests often pass through dozens of different technologies, making them significantly more complex than ever before. The complexity and effort takes you away from doing what you love best, creating new features and experiences that are at the heart of digital transformation. Second factor is your expanded responsibility in delivering a great service in production. Cloud and SaaS is changing your role. It just isn't enough anymore to just write the code. You also have to deploy it and are responsible making sure that it runs well in production. We all know Kubernetes is the system of choice for deployment and management of these container workloads. And it's really taken off with Spring developers. 75% of you are either already deploying containers with Kubernetes or planning to do so in the next 12 months. The question is, how much lift are you getting from this platform? Is it in an aggregate removing toil and letting you concentrate on things that you really add business value with? Or are you doing so much of the work that honestly feels like work? There has to be more streamlined path to production and better tools you need to support day 2 operations. The third factor, you guessed it, is security. As a developer, you're more accountable to secure what you build than ever before. Only 12% of organizations fully integrate security throughout the software development lifecycle. For all this talk of shifting security left, it feels like more work and responsibility for you. Work less enjoyable or creative for you, the developer. Relying on these traditional perimeter security no longer cuts it. According to Forrester, web applications and software vulnerabilities are the top 2 ways external attacks are carried out. This means you need a better security answer. Final factor that we've observed is integrating with legacy. As you know, starting from a clean slate, you can code and deploy something quickly and get immediate gratification. But in reality, you're spending time dealing with tech debt of existing systems. Rarely are you on an island. There's always something you need to integrate with, and traditional integration approaches just don't play well with the way you work. Organizations are increasingly embracing an API-first strategy for application modernization. Internal APIs let you connect to other applications and systems to rapidly deliver new features. But you don't know what you don't know. Is there an API for that? How do you wade through the hundreds of APIs that exist in your company? How do you track down the API you need? This breaks the flow as you're doing research or waiting on some integration should be made available to you. These 4 inhibitors are a double whammy to flow. The first is more obvious. You're not in the zone. You're not as creative. It's harder to find time to innovate. You're stuck in drudge work. The second, you have less time to explore and make use of new technology and patterns. Taking precious time away from learning and staying current with emerging technologies, like microservices, streaming, event-triggered functions. What if there was a better way? What if we took the idea of Spring Starters a little further to codify best practices and have them available at your fingertips? What you could easily discover, try out, and publish internal APIs. What if you were sure that you were building from secure components and had secure access to your services, all using tools you're familiar with? What if you could get into production or into production-like environment quickly? When your development experience lets you get straight into that flow, amazing things can happen. Spring and VMware Tanzu are focused on that developer experience. Today and tomorrow at SpringOne, you'll hear from teams and customers that have done amazing things. Literally digitize processes in 7 weeks. Develop an app in 14 weeks, training software developers, UI UX designers, product managers, and platform engineers. Because a better developer experience helps to address that digital skills gap. Spring has a long history of supporting a better developer experience for Java developers. We have to continue to refine the broader development experience in the face of increased complexity, more security threats, and this ever-growing mountain of existing code and data to integrate with. So, how do we let you get straight to work? Uninterrupted, in the zone. How do we help you have a great developer experience that unlocks your creativity and innovation? To do that, we believe you need these 5 capabilities. Templated starting points to build using best practices. Reducing friction from code to production. A code-centric approach to integration and API-first design. Security that's automated in. And intrinsic observability that is built in and always available. So let's start with the need for code-centric approach to integration with APIs. As I said, integration is a fact of life. Ignore it at your own peril. Spring has long been a valuable tool for integrating systems. With Spring Integration, Spring Batch, and now Spring Cloud Stream and Spring Cloud Task. With modern microservices development, integration cannot be siloed within a separate integration team or integration center of excellence. Gartner predicts that by 2024, 66% of new integrations delivered by IT will use a code-based approach, significantly up from 30% in 2020. APIs are arguably the tip of the spear for modernizing workflows and applications. 76% of you are already using Spring Boot to build internal and external APIs. But managing and securing those APIs can be a real bottleneck. You voted with your feet, and Spring Cloud Gateway downloads on start.spring.io have doubled in the last year. We've been baking into Spring Cloud Gateway a lot of the capabilities that have been historically seen or been in these siloed other API management tools. You don't have to get out of your flow. It's right there in Spring. Over the next 2 days, you're going to hear more about this from the team and how they're solving these challenges surrounding internal API discovery and publishing. Speaking of start.spring.io, it's another great example of how Spring has evolved to help you get into your creative work quickly, easily, effortlessly. And it continues to see growth in the number of projects started there year over year. It sets up the scaffolding for your necessary artifacts and a build file pre-populated with all the dependencies you need. So why stop there? Your production specifications should be so easy. Over the next couple of days, you'll hear about ops configured automation that can introspect developer intent to streamline deployment. Not putting the burden on developers directly. This is what we call an app-aware platform. While we're at it, let's take some of the security burden off as well of you as developers. Spring Security is already the most popular module in Spring Boot portfolio. You'll hear about how AppOps teams can automate security from development to runtime, while giving control to developers in the tools they use. Narrowly scoped serverless functions facilitate least privilege. So let's make those functions easier to build once and run anywhere. Scanning should happen across the full lifecycle: code, images, running workload activity, with points of control for AppOps that can secure the software supply chain. Finally, you'll hear more about observability, how Spring is making it easier to instrument your code, and how Tanzu is providing full stack observability to overcome the increased complexity of modern cloud apps. These 5 capabilities you've heard: curated starting points, path to production, automated security, observability, and collaborative APIs address the development experience gap that keeps you out of that state of flow. And they're essential for success with the Kubernetes ecosystem, regardless where you're running it. VMware Tanzu is all in on Spring and Kubernetes, bringing the best of these worlds together with a focus on your experience as a developer. I'm pleased to announce the beta of Tanzu Application Platform, a modular platform to give developers curated starting points to get into that flow quickly, that honors the separation of concerns, exposes the full power of ecosystem of Kubernetes to AppOps teams, and a simplified path to production for you, the developer. Many of its capabilities are based on Spring's design principles, like inversion of control, dependency injection, and late binding of data services for workloads. Now we're extending them into a modular application platform for Kubernetes. Get into that flow and stay there. Spend more time doing what you enjoy. You'll hear more about it in tomorrow's keynotes, so be sure to stay tuned. With that, please enjoy the rest of SpringOne.
Wow, thanks, Ajay. The VMware Tanzu team works really hard to help people find a quick, safe path to production, and to do so without falling out of flow. We want people to be as productive as possible so that they can get to production quickly and safely. Everything we do is about optimizing for that round trip to production. If you've ever seen any of my talks, I'm sorry. And if you have, then you know that I always start them at start.spring.io. It's my second favorite place on the internet. Obviously, my first favorite place on the internet is production. I love production. You should love production. You should go as early and often as possible. Bring the kids, bring the family. The weather's amazing. It's the happiest place on earth. It's better than Disneyland. But if you haven't been to production, you can begin your journey there at start.spring.io. When you need inspiration in the early morning before a cup of tea or coffee, start Spring.io. When your children are restless and can't sleep, start Spring.io. And when you're suffering from indigestion after a long night of booze and PHP, start Spring.io. It's super important to get all the capabilities that Ajay mentioned right, and it can be hard. I remember trying to figure out things like application security in the world before Spring Security. There was almost nothing about this in any spec to support real-world security use cases. You'd end up having to configure reams of application server vendor-specific XML. I spent a lot of time working on that stuff, and it was around that time that I realized I love whiskey. Yeah. Nowadays, life is much easier for the developer thanks to Spring and Tanzu. Speaking of Spring, our next speaker is a living legend, my hero, and an all-around amazing human being. Let's please welcome to the SpringOne stage, Mr. Jürgen Haller, the co-founder of Spring Framework and its lead for more than 18 years.
At its heart, Spring is all about developer productivity, helping you get to and remain in that state of flow Ajay spoke about. For almost 2 decades, Spring has addressed many of the Java community's challenges from a developer's perspective, integrating with server infrastructure and open source technologies for a smooth development experience. As a part of the dynamically evolving Java ecosystem, Spring continues to adapt to architectural challenges, empowering system architects to embrace different kinds of architectures with a unified programming and configuration model. A key factor of Spring's success is the feedback loop with the wide variety of Spring developers in the industry. Just recently, as many as 95% of you told us that Spring Boot has a huge positive impact on your developer productivity, which is very uplifting for us to hear. So today, we're excited to share more about how we are preparing the framework for the development challenges of 2022 and beyond. Let's embrace the latest architectural trends for new applications and for the evolution of the many existing Spring-based systems out there. I mentioned developer feedback, and I'm excited to announce that results from the State of Spring Survey 2021 are available today. In addition to your very positive feedback on developer productivity, here are a few more insights. 61% of you use Spring Boot as the only or a primary development platform. No surprises that 94% of you use Spring for building microservices, with 35% also building reactive architectures. On a timely note, well over half of you indicated an interest in deploying Spring applications as native executables within the next 2 years. If you're curious, all these insights are in a report we're making available today. Towards the challenges of 2022 and beyond, we are revisiting fundamental characteristics that apps and stacks need to have. Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3 aim to embrace the latest runtime infrastructure and the latest industry initiatives, shaping not only our initial 6.0 and 3.0 releases, but rather an entire generation, with a stream of Spring Framework 6.x and Spring Boot 3.x feature releases to follow. We are revisiting the core framework and its design choices and trade-offs, as well as the infrastructure baseline. And we're really excited about being able to deliver significant benefits to every Spring user, irrespective of whether you containerize apps or not, or build a native executable. This is a new generation of the framework for a new generation of applications that you will build for the years to come. Let me discuss a few specific themes and why they are relevant to us and to you. First, let's talk about updates to the Java platform. This year, we are upgrading the framework to a Java 17 baseline. We intend to empower the community and everyone's Spring applications to fully adopt recent language innovations, starting with all the goodness that accumulates in the Java 17 long-term support generation, and continuing with the Java 18 and 19 feature releases next year. It's not only about language features, this is also about the latest Java Core APIs, and particularly about JVM runtime improvements. As you might be aware, a lot of OpenJDK work in recent years has gone into the virtual machine, so there are plenty of reasons to upgrade overall. At the same time, we keep embracing the latest Kotlin versions, giving you a first-class alternative language for Spring application development, next to the modern-day Java language itself. Moving on to Jakarta EE. Jakarta EE 9 is the continuation of the APIs formerly known as Java EE 8. The namespace is now renamed to Jakarta from what was previously JavaX. So for example, what was previously referred to as javax.servlet is now jakarta.servlet. Jakarta EE9 is, initially, literally just a repackaging of the Java EE8 APIs. But by upgrading to the Jakarta namespace, you will help us prepare for the further evolution of those APIs, such as Servlet, the Java Persistence API, and Bean validation in Jakarta EE10 and beyond. Next, I'd like to talk about native executables and ahead-of-time processing. You might be aware of the Spring Native initiative already. It is one of the most exciting efforts that we're working on right now, preparing Spring applications for deployment as native executables on GraalVM. There are many benefits coming out of these efforts. With native executables, the factors that get mentioned most are of course startup time and memory footprint. That said, traditional JVM deployments will benefit from ahead-of-time processing as well. For me, these broad benefits to many kinds of applications are the most attractive part. As you well know, Spring has a tradition of enabling many kinds of application architectures. Once again, we are embracing the latest web and messaging technologies, for example RSocket and GraphQL, and the choices that they open up for system architects. Later at SpringOne, we are further exploring RSocket as well as GraphQL, so please check out these sessions if this is an area of interest to you. Next up, the Spring Observability Initiative. Our aim here is to bring unified metrics and tracing APIs to the entire Spring ecosystem. The observability keynote that runs in the morning on day 2 is something I think you will really enjoy. So now, let's talk about the roadmap leading up to Spring Framework 6.0. In general, our preference is for releasing at the right time, in alignment with the ecosystem developments around us. This roadmap is our current guidance to give you an idea and to help integrators and early adopters to prepare. The first 6.0 milestone should arrive later this year, introducing the Java 17 and Jakarta baseline upgrades, as well as a few initial refactorings. Further milestones will then include specific features and enhancements towards our native and observability themes. We aim to enter the release candidate phase sometime in the middle of next year, and general availability is expected in late 2022. Now, in case you were wondering, the Spring Boot 3.0 release plan is closely aligned with the Spring Framework 6.0, providing streamlined integration with the core container and many more features across the board in Boot. Most importantly, Boot 3.0 is where the native story really comes together, with first-class support for native executable deployment. Of course, Boot also manages a wide set of third-party dependencies. Boot 3.0 will pick up a new generation of third-party upgrades in the ecosystem, not least of it all due to Jakarta EE9. We expect timelines to work well with Boot 3.0 and Framework 6.0. For example, Tomcat 10 and JD 11 are out already, with Hibernate ORM 6 expected for next year. In parallel with all our efforts on Framework 6 and Boot 3 milestones, we of course keep working on the Spring Framework 5.3x release stream and on further Spring Boot 2.x feature releases. For example, we are adding official Java 17 support to Spring Boot 2.6, coming up in November this year. If you are currently on Boot 2.x, you can look forward to further 2.x feature releases, such as Spring Boot 2.7 in Q2 2022. With Boot 2.x remaining in active development for the time being, feel free to upgrade to Boot 3 at your own pace. Having said that, I highly recommend preparing yourself for the eventual Boot 3 upgrade by upgrading to the latest 2.x releases at your earliest convenience. That's the end of my announcements and updates, but we are only warming up here at SpringOne. There is so much more to look forward to. As you know, we have talks across 5 tracks. Don't forget the Q&A opportunity at the end of each talk. Please make use of it, and most importantly, tailor SpringOne to your interest. Finally, I'll leave you with a personal selection of breakout topics related to the themes I've been referring to. This includes my own talk, going from Spring Framework 5.3 to 6.0. I'll be diving into some of the technical plans and the roadmap impact in more detail. Thanks for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Wow, thank you, Jürgen. There are a ton of great things in Java 17, and I can't wait for the community to upgrade. It's going to be so much better than that creakingly old and long since irrelevant Java 8. Think about it. We've got more versions of Java since Java 8 than we do leading up to Java 8. By that metric, you could say that Java 17 is more than twice as good as Java 8. That's a math joke, people. Java 8 is slower, less syntax rich, less production ready, less containers ready, less performant, less interesting, and less secure than Java 17. It's technically inferior in every way. It's also morally inferior in every way. The look of disappointment, dismay, and disgust in your children's eyes when they find out that you're using Java 8 in production is heartbreaking. Don't do it. Do the right thing. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Upgrade. Now, Jürgen just touched on a lot of amazing stuff. I'm personally really digging Spring Native and Spring GraphQL. GraphQL, of course, was created by Facebook in 2012, which was the year that, coincidentally, Carly Rae Jepsen's anthem to eventual consistency, Call Me Maybe, came out. Today, Spring application developers have built-in support for HTTP and REST APIs, for RSecond APIs, and GraphQL APIs. And of course, there's good third-party support for gRPC. So thank you, Spring team, and thank you, Jürgen. And now, let's welcome back Ajay.
Here on the SpringOne stage, you heard Microsoft preview and launch Azure Spring Cloud, a fully managed service for Spring Boot. Since then, we've seen some great success stories. Swiss Re is one of the world's largest reinsurers, is running financial apps using Azure Spring Cloud to run Spring Boot applications. Access via Spring Cloud Gateway. Their developers get to use the tools they already know, while operations are heavily automated and take advantage of the secure infrastructure and worldwide reach of Azure. Another great example, Rally's. They own over 130 grocery stores and saw a massive surge in online grocery shopping during the pandemic. The team modernized to microservices, running again on Azure Spring Cloud in time for the busy holiday season and record-breaking e-commerce sales. Now their developers can focus on feature development, and scaling has gone from time-consuming activity to simply a validation exercise. In each of these, the Spring ecosystem shines, providing the plumbing for developers to access data, instrument for monitoring, apply security, etc. You'll hear from Julia Lucen from Microsoft once again later in the keynote to hear how Microsoft is helping Java developers run their Spring apps on Azure. Julia will share the latest on Azure Spring Cloud and our joint collaboration. But before I hand things over to her, let's first hear directly from an organization that's been using Azure Spring Cloud.
Morgan Stanley is a global financial services institution. We help individuals, families, governments, and institutions raise, manage, and distribute the capital they need to meet their goals. Technology is a key part of how we do business, including handling very large volumes in trade settlements daily. We process millions of messages per day in our global settlements platform across major financial markets. We are creating our next generation security settlements platform to maintain our competitive edge. Hi, my name is Dhiren Shah, and I lead the team that is working on our security settlements platform transformation. We decided to approach this project in stages with the goal of developing a cloud-based, message-oriented solution that can horizontally scale, separate data stores, command and event handlers, and an idempotent system. For the first phase, we migrated from mainframe to Spring Boot apps. Second, we deployed Spring Boot apps to Azure Spring Cloud and ran a parallel production across few selected markets. The final phase will be scaling to markets across the globe and sunsetting our mainframe system. Azure Spring Cloud is at the heart of our solution, running modern Spring services for command and event handling and reporting. We are also leveraging other Azure services, including SQL databases for storing business data, Key Vault for managing secrets and zero trust, Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, and Application Insights for end-to-end monitoring, and Azure Networking for secure communications. Azure Spring Cloud is helping us run mission-critical systems on Azure, and we are moving more applications with the ultimate goal of sunsetting our mainframe systems for significant cost savings. We'll be able to expand our settlement business into new regions with shorter time to market. Thank you.
It's great to be back at SpringOne. Last year, we announced the general availability of Azure Spring Cloud, our managed service for Spring Boot applications, jointly built and operated with VMware Tanzu. Since then, we have seen customers building amazing solutions with the service. You heard Ajay mention customers like Swiss Re and Relies, and you just saw how Morgan Stanley is using Azure Spring Cloud to power its trade settlements platform on Azure. Azure Spring Cloud is part of our commitment to helping Java developers be successful on Azure. In the last year, we have been doubling down on our commitment to Java. We have added more support in Visual Studio Code, including extensions to directly deploy and manage Java apps on Azure. Developers can use more than 30 Spring integrations to idiomatically interact with Azure services. And earlier this year, we announced the Microsoft build of OpenJDK, a no-cost, long-term support distribution of OpenJDK that is open source and available for anyone to deploy anywhere. We're providing value to Java developers in 3 key ways. First, we let Java developers build on their terms. They can use their favorite IDEs, build, and automation tools with Azure. Azure plugins for popular IDEs like IntelliJ let developers keep familiar workflows and be more productive. As an example, we recently released an update to our IntelliJ toolkit so developers can deploy Java apps and dependencies to Azure App Service in a single step with Maven. Second, Azure offers a full range of managed compute, database, messaging, and monitoring options for Java apps. These help developers build complete cloud solutions without worrying about infrastructure. Security is more important than ever, and Azure provides tools to secure your software supply chain, like Azure Security Center and Azure Defender. Third, we have a strong partner ecosystem that provides best-of-breed solutions on Azure. We have worked with partners like Redis, Elastic, Confluent, and many more to bring differentiated experiences on Azure for Java developers. Our partnership with VMware and VMware Tanzu exemplifies this work. We created Azure Spring Cloud to address common challenges for Spring developers. Working with enterprise customers over the last year, VMware and Microsoft recognized the need for additional capabilities in Azure Spring Cloud. Many of these customers are running thousands of Spring Boot applications on-prem and need advanced capabilities and support to accelerate their Spring modernization projects. Based on our learnings, we started work on a new Azure Spring Cloud tier, which includes commercially supported components to meet the needs of enterprise customers. Now we are excited to announce availability of Azure Spring Cloud Enterprise in preview. With Azure Spring Cloud Enterprise, you get the innovation of VMware Tanzu paired with the operational knowledge of Azure. You can choose the Tanzu components you want to use and run them on fully managed Azure infrastructure. You get advanced configuration capabilities like customizable build packs, and as with standard tier, you can integrate with Azure Platform Services and scale and deploy globally. All of this comes with expanded world-class support, including 24/7 Spring runtime support and access to Spring experts. Going forward, we'll continue to add new Tanzu components and capabilities with the same level of enterprise support. Now I will turn over to Balan, Partner Director of Program Management at Microsoft, to show enterprise in action. Balan?
Thank you, Julia. Hello, everybody. It's great to join you all at SpringOne. In the next few minutes, I want to show you how easy it is to get VMware Tanzu running in Azure Spring Cloud, the only fully managed PaaS for Spring applications built on top of Kubernetes. Let's head to the Azure portal and create a new Spring Cloud instance. I'm going to use an existing resource group, and I'm going to call this instance Pet Clinic. We made it super easy to provision the VMware Tanzu components available in the Azure Marketplace as fully managed services within this Azure Spring Cloud instance. All we need to do is pick the enterprise tier. In addition to Tanzu services, the enterprise tier also includes the VMware Spring Runtime with 24/7 support for the Spring ecosystem directly from VMware. A new tab is now available for configuring the VMware Tanzu components. For the preview, we are starting with the VMware Spring Runtime and these components. You can configure how much resources you want to allocate to these Tanzu components. For example, if you want to support faster builds and more builds in parallel, you can allocate more resources to the Tanzu build service. By default, we run all services in pairs with automatic failover for high availability. Now let's create this instance. Because Azure Spring Cloud is built on top of Kubernetes, we're able to bring Tanzu's cloud-native implementations of popular Spring Cloud services directly into Azure Spring Cloud. It's the same as running your apps in Tanzu on your own Kubernetes cluster, but with the SLAs, security, and reliability of a fully managed Azure service. The Tanzu app configuration service is now implemented as a Kubernetes config map, but it can still use a Git backend. Azure Spring Cloud takes care of validating and wiring up the application configuration service to the Git repo that holds the configuration for all our microservices. This instance already has a few microservices running. Now I want to show you how easy it is to create a new microservice and deploy our code to it. Let's give our new microservice a name. Azure is seamlessly integrated with GitHub, which means that we can now use a GitHub action to deploy to this Azure Spring Cloud instance right from my repo. The GitHub action uses the Tanzu build service running in Azure Spring Cloud to build the code using cloud-native build packs. These include open source build packs and Tanzu build packs that encapsulate VMware's deep expertise with Java and Spring. Tanzu build service also caches dependencies so that subsequent builds will be faster. Now we're ready to see our app in action. This is a familiar pet clinic application now running in Azure Spring Cloud using VMware Tanzu. Now I want to show you a few more features in Azure Spring Cloud. With service bindings, developers can wire up their apps to these services without having to worry about credential management or key rotation. Azure Spring Cloud also enables developers to build secure apps by default. All traffic within a Spring Cloud instance can be secured using end-to-end TLS without having to worry about operating a service mesh yourself. Microservices can also use Azure Managed Identity for authentication with other services such as databases and messaging. Azure Spring Cloud takes care of integrating seamlessly with Azure Active Directory to enable this secure authentication mechanism. For operations, Azure Spring Cloud gives you the right level of control and visibility. All apps deployed to Azure Spring Cloud are automatically instrumented, and logs and metrics are available from the get-go. A built-in application map shows the dependencies between your microservices and external services such as databases, leveraging the distributed tracing capabilities available in Spring Cloud. You can also switch to an individual microservice and quickly see its load and performance. Once you're there, you can easily scale up your application without having to worry about Kubernetes configuration. And you can also scale out your microservice instances and set up scaling policies using Azure Autoscaling, which supports many different triggers. You can also use Azure services such as application change analysis, how and when, which is invaluable for operations. One of the biggest considerations for enterprises is the compliance and security of their cloud deployments and operations. For auditing purposes, all operations performed on your apps and on your Spring Cloud instances are available through the Azure Activity Log. As a first-class Azure service, Azure Spring Cloud is also integrated into Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center provides visibility into your overall security and compliance posture and helps manage them through insights and recommendations. For example, Azure Security Center has found that all our microservices are available on the public internet and is recommending that we place our Azure Spring Cloud instance within an Azure VNet. Azure Security Center policies and insights are constantly being updated, ensuring that your apps and DevOps on Azure are always secure and compliant. You can also set up custom policies specific to your organization and deployments. There's a lot more here for Spring applications and developers. Together, VMware and Microsoft are committed to empowering dev teams everywhere with the most productive and secure cloud platform for modern application development. We can't wait to see the apps that you will build on Azure Spring Cloud with VMware Tanzu. Thank you.
Thanks, Balan. Azure Spring Cloud Enterprise offers differentiated value to enterprises that need greater functionality, configurability, and support. It's the only offering with fully managed Tanzu components, and it's backed by the enterprise expertise of VMware and Microsoft. We invite you to join the preview today.
I love that. I love these sorts of feel-good stories. Wasn't that great? I know we've only just met, but I feel like I can share a little bit about myself. Everybody's got their own hobbies, things that they like to do. Some people like to run, others read or write, play video games, cook. We even have foodies, which are people that like food, which is nice because the rest of humanity is famously not interested in food. Anyway, I'm a little different. I have one thing that I love, a thing that I think about right before sleep and the first thing in the morning, a thing that I love almost more than anything else. I love, love, love taking customers away from mainframe vendors. And I love it so much, y'all. So thank you, Morgan Stanley, for sharing your journey with us. It wasn't all that long ago that we stood on the main stage of SpringOne 2019 and announced Azure Spring Cloud. And now here we are in 2021 and able to see just how far that Microsoft and VMware partnership has come. What a privilege. I'm over the moon about this progress, and we have tons of great follow-up sessions here at SpringOne for your consideration. I'll be doing the first breakout on Azure Spring Cloud called Rapid Development with Azure Spring Cloud in just a few hours at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, along with my friends Microsoft's Julian Dubois and VMware's Leila Porter. Every year, the SpringOne main stage sessions feature stories of transformation from some of our most interesting and diverse customers. This year, Ajay talked with Kirsten Bland, Global Reach Director for A21. This story is special. It highlights some of the life-changing work our people at Tanzu Labs are doing with this nonprofit to help train educators and students around the world to spot and avoid potential child trafficking. Let's hear that story now.
VMware is working to build a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable digital future for all. As part of our 2030 agenda, we have set 30 goals to be achieved by 2030 to drive 3 key outcomes: trust, equity, and sustainability. We believe in a digital future that is accessible, inclusive, and just for all. This includes our nonprofit digital transformation efforts that work to accelerate nonprofits' journey to digital cloud. Our VMware Digital Tanzu Labs recently worked with A21, a nonprofit dedicated to eradicating human trafficking, to help them understand how to move their curriculum online, educating more young people on how to avoid the dangers of human trafficking. I'm pleased to welcome Kristen Bland, Global Reach Director at A21. Thank you for joining us at SpringOne, Kristen. If you could get started by telling us a little bit about A21's mission.
A21 stands for Abolishing Slavery Everywhere Forever. We are a nonprofit organization that began in 2007 when our founders were going through an airport and they saw posters of missing women and children and just began to ask the questions, why are so many people missing? And they found out that there are over 40 million people who are victims of human trafficking right now, and over 25% of those victims are children. And so this began the work of A21 around the world. We've since been able to expand to 19 offices in 14 countries, and we work to reach, rescue, and restore. So that means we focus on prevention, awareness, and education, on victim identification and legal support, and then on holistic aftercare.
What a great cause. What did your team take away from the experience of working with Tanzu Labs?
Our team had the most incredible experience working with Tanzu Labs. We were able to spend 8 weeks engaging with them every single day, looking at what it would take to create a K-12 curriculum that focuses on human trafficking education that would be made available digitally to really be able to reach students who are at risk to human trafficking. And so we know that through COVID-19, there are so many students who are online, students who have received devices in their homes for the first time, and at the same time, there's a lot of predators out there who want to groom students and ultimately exploit them. And so we are so passionate about creating prevention education tools that can equip facilitators as well as reach students with the relevant information that they need to be protected. And so through the engagement with Tanzu Labs, we were able to look at what this would take. We were able to test assumptions. We were able to really map out the ecosystem and explore what could unintended consequences be, and just receive all of these skills and tools that we're able to apply across the board in our work to abolish human trafficking.
Yeah, it's even more critical now in the modern age to get the digital information out. So let's dig a little bit deeper. What benefits has 821 seen? In particular, how have educators benefited from this revised curriculum?
Since our engagement, we were able to create a pilot program, taking the recommendation of the Tanzu Lab team and putting everything online for educators in the state of Florida. So far we've been able to train over 61 educators with 88 schools and reach 4,000 students through our pilot program. And we've been gathering information and data that we'll be able to use to create the facilitator training and student curriculum in the future that will reach tens of millions of students. And we are so grateful for the incredible work of the Tanzu Lab and just their help in us setting up the pilot, analyzing the results, knowing how to do the interviews, and ultimately gaining this information that's going to help us mobilize and protect the next generation.
We welcome being part of this critical effort, and thank you for the great work 821 is doing in the world to help fight human trafficking.
Thank you.
Wow. That's impressive work coming from 821 and Tanzu Labs. I'm so encouraged to hear about that successful pilot program and the thousands of students who are benefiting from this program. That's truly a tech for good story. And now for our final talk, please welcome Professor Sakina Hoffler from Loyola University in New Orleans.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you at this year's SpringOne conference, Code with the Flow. I'm obsessed with this idea of flow, of being in that state of pure creation. And we're all creatives, whether it's writing or developing. It is our job to make something new, to imagine, to innovate. But in order to do so, we need the space, the time, and the freedom. Some of the most genius ideas were created in that state of flow. Famed author Raymond Bradbury became obsessed with this idea of firemen going around and not putting out fires, but instead setting books on fire. He went to a local library for weeks, paid 10 cents per half hour to use a typewriter. This was the 1950s. And against those time and money constraints, typed as fast as he could to get the story out of him. $9.80 later, he finished the first draft of Fahrenheit 451, which has gone on to sell over 10 million copies and join a canon to become an American classic. As a writer, the state of flow has helped me create my strongest stories. And as a professor, I've shown my students different ways they can enter the state of flow faster, which I'm going to share with you today. In writing, we often talk about the empty well, which happens when you've used up your creative juices, or you're distracted by other things, or you're stuck staring at a blank page, a blinking cursor, unsure of where or how to start. Inspiration, scaffolding, motivation, knowledge, experience, creative juices, ideas, and energy help fill the well. To enter that state of flow, you need a filled well. With these 6 steps, I will show you how you can continuously refill your well so that you can enter the state of flow faster. And once you're there, stay there. Step 1 is the simplest. Turn off the outside world. No emails, no phone. Put your phone on airplane mode. Have your partner or babysitter take the kids. Think about it. You finally settled down, you're ready to work, you're in it, you're innovating, you're vibing, and then your email sounds. There's Outlook, there's a text, there's Twitter. Now you're responding to things, reading emails or news articles that have nothing to do with your creative work, getting involved in internet or Slack discussions that have nothing to do with your creative work. You're distracted, and it's going to take a long time to reach that level of concentration. Nicholas Carr argued in his Atlantic essay and later in his book, The Shallows, about how the internet, those constant alerts and updates, chips away and alters our capacity for deep concentration and contemplation. You can't refill the well if you're constantly allowing distractions to block your inspiration. By cutting off the outside world, you're allowing yourself to not only enter, but stay in a state of flow once you're there. Step 2. Develop a physical and mental routine. When I say physical, I mean things like making your bed, going for a jog, grabbing a cup of coffee. When I wake up to write, I do the following. My morning pages, which I'll talk about next, my voice exercises. I read fiction unrelated to what I'm writing for an hour. I make a cup of tea, I sit at a table, and I write longhand. By the time I've done these actions and sit down, my brain knows it's time to write, my brain knows it's time to go. A purposeful routine subconsciously prepares you for creation before the conscious part of your brain even catches on. What habits have you developed to refill your well? Figure out what works for you and make it a habit. Don't forget to visualize. Step 3, keep a journal. One of the habits I incorporate is Julia Cameron's morning pages. Every morning I wake up and I set a timer for 15 minutes, and I write in a wide rule composition book. I write whatever the heck comes to my mind. Every bad thought, every critic who has bashed my writing, my fears about writing, where I'm stuck in my writing. My morning pages are filled with lines like, I'm a terrible writer. I'm never going to finish this dish. What am I doing? Should I go back to engineering? I write until my timer goes off. I do this so that when I sit down to actually work on my creative work, I've gotten rid of my bad thoughts and my inner critic. They're not making noise in the back of my head anymore. I've addressed them and now I can focus. Exercising your thoughts can help you figure out what's blocking you, help you directly address your worries and your fears. Writing things out clears your mind and helps you get into that state of flow faster. It also helps you stay there. Step 4, know when to take a break. Perhaps you've done it all, your routine, you cut off all distractions, you're sitting at the computer and it ain't happening. Nothing's coming out. Maybe it's the fear of the blank page. Maybe you used up all your creative juices yesterday and now your well is dry. That means it's time to take a break. Take a walk, cook something, play with your dogs. Let your brain rest, reset, and restart. Whenever I'm writing and I'm stuck on a story idea or how to get started, I try to take a walk or a shower to change my setting. I reread my morning pages. I'm doing these things to help me refill my well, to help me get back into that state of flow. Because I want to be writing, I want to create. Perhaps I just need to not look at my project for a couple of hours. After my break, I always return to work. And that's the difference between taking a break and procrastination. At the end of the day, I try never, ever to leave a blank page. If there's something there and it isn't right, I can always fix it. If there's nothing there, I'll be back exactly where I started tomorrow. Remember, you cannot revise a blank page. Step 5, know when to collaborate. Don't be afraid to ask others for help and for their thoughts and opinions. In writing, we have something called workshop, where we send out our stories, some of them good, some of them not so good, to our peers and our mentors for feedback. Once, I wrote a story about a teenage girl struggling to get along with the half-sister her father had out of wedlock. I end with the two sisters racing across a lake to a dock, and the half-sister slips beneath the water. Does she drown? I left it a mystery because I didn't know the answer. My mentor read it and said, this story does not have an ending. I went back and gave it a definitive answer, she doesn't drown, and that story went on to win an award. Having a fresh pair of eyes look at your problem might help you overcome a hump and re-enter that state of flow. It might help make something that was okay, good, or even great. Last, but certainly not least, and this is the most important step, which is step 6, embrace failure. Failure is not a bad thing. It's teaching you how not to do something. Every story I've published has done well. But what people don't see is the 30 unpublished stories I have sitting in my drawer that will never, ever see the light of day. I've been writing long enough to know that I will write a story, and even though I work on multiple drafts of that story for months, sometimes years, it might not work out. I'll write another story and the same thing happens again. I don't consider those poorly executed stories failure. It's experimentation, it's learning, it's adding tools to my toolbox. It's slowly but surely refilling my well. I'm learning how not to write a story. If everything I've written was technically correct and published, that means I'm not innovating, I'm not trying something new. You've got to allow yourself to be bad. You've got to allow yourself to make mistakes. You've got to embrace failure, hug it, squeeze it, say, you're really a part of my success. Those failures are simply scaffolding, learning how not to do something so that when you're in that state of flow, you don't get hung up on the mechanics, the how-tos. You know how to do it. You've already put in the work, and now you can just create. I like to end by saying this. Life happens. When COVID hit America, I just taken my preliminary exams for my PhD, and I just found out I was pregnant. My family lived in New Jersey. My sister worked the COVID unit at her hospital, and my parents got sick with COVID. I did not write for a long time. I sat in front of a TV, panicked, unwashed, and watched the news, Contagion, World War Z, every apocalyptic movie I could stream. What helped me get back to writing was following these steps. I turned off the outside world. I developed a physical and mental routine. I kept a journal. I took breaks. I asked for help. I let myself be really bad at writing. Slowly, very slowly, my well began to refill. And finally, this year, I finished a project I've been working on for years. Combine these steps. Actively work to continuously refill your well. These steps will allow you to enter the state of flow, they allow you to stay there, and they allow you to innovate. And if a time arises when you lose your way, they'll help you get back there. And if you're thinking of ways to support developers in near creative processes, consider your own involvement. Minimize interruptions and distractions, including your own demand for a response to inquiries. Encourage breaks. Encourage daydreaming. Promote collaboration. Encourage them when they try something new and bold and it doesn't quite work out. And when life happens, understand their need for time and space. It takes a while to learn how to get to and stay in a state of flow. Create an atmosphere where they can thrive. Thank you.
What a wonderful talk by Professor Hoffler. I loved every minute of that. You know, I've been trying to put some of Professor Hoffler's great advice into practice myself. I've been trying to write in a journal every day in the morning, and I found the practice immediately valuable. Here you can see today's journal entry. It's like a mental palate cleanser. I've always been a big proponent of minimizing distractions. It takes active and conscientious effort to ignore this much email, but I do it anyway because I care. And because I want to stay in flow, to stay in the zone. Being in flow is bliss. I love being in flow, and I loathe things that distract from it. I think that most of us, okay, look, I get it already. It's not a Zoom call, and I did remember to wear pants, okay? Anyway, I don't like things that have gaps, put gaps in the action. What we just discovered is that this is the truth behind so many things in modern software. They're all about optimizing for fast feedback. Continuous delivery, microservices, cloud computing, test-driven development, agile, continuous integration. They're all about fast feedback, which results in that sense of being in flow. It's a wonderful confidence and morale-boosting feeling. Indeed, this feeling of flow is one thing that software developers have in common with artists, marathon runners, and video gamers. Alrighty, my friends, we're nearly done for the morning, but the party's only just begun. We've got a ton of great stuff lined up for you today. Before we let you go, however, there's some quick housekeeping. First, thank you to our sponsors for making this event possible. Please be sure to come back at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the closing Day 1 main stage talks. And again, thank you everybody for coming, and have fun.